Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, thank you so much for clicking on this video. Hopefully you gained some valuable insight that can help you. Really, my goal is to share as much as I can. In the last year or so, I left the corporate world and I started the venture of being a business owner, a small business owner. So in this video, I'm really focusing on just sharing information and knowledge and just on things that I couldn't find on YouTube or online. And if I was able to find them, my goal is to elaborate a little bit more now that I've actually lived it. So that's really kind of the point of this channel. It's gonna be tons of different topics, nothing set in stone. I'm still trying to figure out where it's gonna go. But for now, I'm focusing on being consistent and sharing things as I can. If you are returning, thank you so much. I'm so grateful for your time, and again, I hope you gained something today. I'm gonna be talking all about things to consider before you actually quit your job. So when you take that step to quit, it's really difficult to kind of process that you're gonna be leaving something that you put in some effort to, right? Maybe it's because you've been there for 5 or more years, or maybe you've just been there for a week. It might be a little bit easier. But to give you a little bit of a background, before I started my small business, I worked in an organization for almost 7 years. Before that, I had been in 2 other organizations, for one of them for 2 years and the other one for about 1.5 years. So I have my fair share of experience in the corporate world, and this last departure was probably the hardest, just because I had made it to the pivotal, sorry, I got an email. I had made it to the pivotal point of my career, which was the top of the org chart. I made it to the highest point that I could make it to. And unfortunately, some things happened that made it really a reality. It made everything kind of become a reality that I needed to move on, and I made that decision. But before I did, I went through this list of items, and this was just I didn't look it up, right? It just so happened to be these things which I'm going to be sharing with you. And once going through that list, it really kind of opened up my eyes and made me realize, okay, I do need to move on. I'm going to go on to the next step. And in the next video, I'm going to be talking about actions to take before your last day on the job. But here, before you get to that decision, really do think about these 7 things, and hopefully it'll help you make the right decision for you. So with that said, thank you once again, everyone, and let's get right into it. Number 1, so before submitting your letter of resignation, consider, did you get out of the job what you had hoped to when you applied for it? Does that kind of make sense? So when you apply for a job, you hope to gain, aside from a financial gain, you hope to gain either some sort of skill set, experience, a title, and typically the rule of thumb is 2 years, right? 2 years in a position. You can take what you gain from that and stick it into your next role or your next venture, your next application, and so on. So with that said, the reason why it's so important is if you're only a few months away from your 2-year anniversary, let's say you're 6 months away, really think about if you can stick it out a little bit longer to gain that 2-year momentum before you actually quit, because you can take that relevant skills, those relevant skills that you built, that title, that experience, you can take that with you, and it looks acceptable to the next employer. Now, of course, every employer is going to be different. Not everyone goes by the 2-year mark. Me being in a supervisor position and hiring people for my team, that was one thing that I definitely look forward in an application is why would somebody leave before the 2-year mark? It just looks a little bit inconsistent and questionable, but again, it varies by employer. This is just something to consider. If you really are close to the 2-year mark, I would suggest think about it, you might be able to hang in there for a little bit longer before hitting the quit button. So that is number one. Number two is, what would it take for you to be happy in that position? And this is really important because sometimes I think a lot of conversations about why you are considering leaving, they do derive from being unhappy, uncontent, from being stressed, feeling overworked, maybe undervalued. But what is the reason that you're leaving, and what would it take for you to stay in that role? So I'll give you an example. Earlier in my career at that organization, I was unhappy with my compensation. And the reason was, I didn't know I wasn't happy until something happened. I was actually at the printer and minding my own business, right? And I went in to make a copy, and I found a salary schedule for a member of my team. So nothing against this person. He was absolutely amazing. However, I was his supervisor. I did have about 5 more years of relevant experience, and also I had higher education, which, again, nothing against this person, but I just felt like I would be compensated accordingly, right? Well, anyway, going back to the document, salary schedule showed that this person on my team was making about $10,000 more a year than I. And of course, I mean, as you can imagine, I was extremely upset. I was furious. And I got that document the entire day. To be honest, I didn't feel as motivated to work as hard as I was, considering the fact that I was making less than my own teammate. So it was a very awkward kind of day, and I knew that if I just kind of let that simmer, that I was going to continue to be unhappy, and this was going to carry on, and potentially I would want to leave that role. And this is early on, so I hadn't yet experienced all of the opportunity and gain that I had in the last 7 years. So I decided to set an appointment with my supervisor and HR, and that was really, really nerve-wracking, but I did it. I talked to my, sorry. You know what's funny? I have Doxies. They're wiener dogs. We have 2 of them, and we had to get those barking collars. Like they vibrate anytime they bark, or on the 3rd bark or the 7th bark, and they're relentless. They don't care. So hopefully they stop, and we will keep going. So I made the appointment, attended, and I talked to my supervisor about, I literally came with a list of all the things that I do, why I deserve this, and why this was unfair. Lo and behold, she had no idea, and neither did HR, that I was being compensated at a lower rate than my teammate. So they were able to make that adjustment for me. I didn't have to quit. I was happy again. And all of this was because I spoke up and I realized, what would it take for me to be happy? So before you actually quit, really consider what that thing is. And if you can, and if you're willing to, open up the discussion about it with whoever, whether it's your supervisor, HR, a leadership team, what have you. At least take that chance before you have to make, the journey of leaving and starting a new job or a new career or whatever. So that is number 2. Number 3, so when you do quit, it's important to consider that there might be a rebuttal from either your supervisor or the CEO or whoever is in a higher position, or in a position that is reviewing your submission or your request to leave. They, for the most part, if you're a great employer or if they value you, if they have any sort of morals, they're gonna try to ameliorate the situation by giving you another option. So if they tell you, thanks for submitting your letter of resignation, but we don't agree with it. This is why, this is what we would like to do for you. Can you defend your decision to leave? If you can, I think it's safe to say that you've already made the difficult decision to move forward in quitting. And if you can't, that might allude to the idea that you're not quite yet done with that job. You know, maybe there's some unfinished business there, or maybe you're not 100% sure that you want to quit, and maybe there's something that can be addressed. Going back to number 2, what would it take for you to be happy? So that was number 3. Can you defend your choice to leave if needed be? Number 4, consider, am I leaving in good standing? And this is really interesting because you're probably thinking, well, I'm gonna leave anyway, like I'm never gonna see these people again. But, and coming from experience, life has a funny way of throwing wrenches at you, and regardless if you're leaving to start your own business or if you're going to another organization and you already got hired there and you have your start date, or if you don't, even more of a reason to be in good standing. But you never know when you're going to need something from your past employer, this employer that you're considering leaving. Sometimes you may need proof of employment, for housing, for credit reasons. Even if you did leave, they will on occasion reference your last employer. You might need them to confirm employment for a new employer. You might need a reference from your supervisor. I remember needing copies of pay stubs that I forgot to download. You never know what you're gonna need from that organization, and it's super important that even though you're making the decision to part ways, that you leave in a manner that's amicable for both of you. Another common thing that I've seen happen, and it actually happened in my team at that time, is that an employee will leave on their own terms and it's in good standing, and later, let's say circumstances change, they will opt to come back and they will be rehireable. So I think it's just something to consider, that before you do leave, are you leaving as a disgruntled employee? Are you leaving in good standing? Is everything, you know, in a position where if you needed some sort to leave and have some sort of communication with the organization, that it would be professional and amicable? So that would be number 4. Am I leaving in good standing? And if you are a disgruntled employee, consider going back to number 2, which again is, what would it take for you to be happy? Is there anything that somebody or someone or your supervisor, is there anything they can do to help the situation, you know, to address any issues that are impeding you from being the best you in that position? Number 5 is, can I financially afford to quit? And this one is super important. I know for me personally, finances were one of the reasons that I could have stayed in that position, in that organization, in that role, putting up with things that I was not happy with because I couldn't afford to leave. And not having a financial cushion, it's another added stressor, right? You're quitting your job, you're looking for a new one, or you're starting your business. Not having a cushion to take care of you and your family, if that's applicable to you, it can just add another weight to your shoulders, which you can avoid if you plan accordingly. So I would highly suggest, if you cannot financially afford to quit, to try again to hang in there, or refer to number 2, which is, what would it take for you to be happy? Maybe talk to your supervisor or somebody in a leadership position or HR, so they can help you get to that point where you can stick it through. Of course, some circumstances are very different, just like mine were, where I just could not physically put myself through another day at that job, or another month or whatever. And that's a little bit different. Luckily, in my reserves, I had about 6 months, and that, from what I've gathered, is typically the staple number, to have about 6 months of reserves to be able to take care of you and your family while you're kind of in this transition period. And it's kind of funny, it was exactly 6 months of 6 months that it took for me to get through those savings that I had. And at that 6 month mark, I was able to get my business in good standing, and then also find another job in the meantime to be able to supplement my business income. So again, consider your finances before you do decide to quit, just because depending on the nature of your departure, you may or may not qualify for unemployment benefits. So definitely think that through, and we will move on to number 6, which is, what is my plan for day 1 after you quit? And again, think about this before you actually consider leaving your job. What are your days going to look like after you quit? One of the things that I struggled with significantly after I left my job, just because I had been in that position for so long and it had become a part of who I was, but I really struggled with not having that role anymore. I would look through my phone expecting emails, expecting some sort of correspondence from my team members, expecting to host a meeting. So before I considered quitting my job, I really wish that I would have kind of planned out for that time period, even just my first day after not, having that job. And I think that would have kind of, I guess it would have better outlined like my next steps. I think I did a pretty good job though of getting back into the swing of things, staying busy, being intentional with my time. Because at first you kind of think like, wow, okay, let's say you do have 6 months of reserves, and let's say you are gonna start looking for a job. It's really easy to fall into that trap of like, oh, I have time. I'm gonna enjoy, I've been working for 7 years or 10 years or 20 years, and I'm gonna enjoy my day off. And tomorrow I'll start looking for a job. But that one day can turn into weeks, and next thing you know, you lose track and you didn't find another job, you didn't start your business, you didn't do anything with your time. So it's really important for number 6 is to consider your plan before you actually quit your job. And finally, we made it to number 7. The last thing to consider before you're quitting your job is, are you scared? And if you are, totally and completely normal, telling you from experience. It's very scary to think that you're leaving something that's secure. It's also very scary to think that you are not going to be bound to that job anymore. It's very scary to think that you're going to be starting something new. So being scared is not the issue. I think if the fear is something that is impeding your daily life, because you're constantly thinking, well, what if I leave and blah, 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 and it's taking over and consuming your abilities to do anything, then really, I think that kind of alludes to the fact that you're not quite yet ready to quit. Maybe you haven't, really nail down the reason why you're leaving. Maybe you haven't figured out what it would take for you to be happy, or maybe if you did, you haven't talked to anybody about it, right? Maybe you are not leaving in good standing. Maybe you're not financially able to quit. Maybe you don't have a plan. Did you see what I did there? I went through all the numbers 1 through 6. So if you are so scared, you haven't necessarily touched on all the items that we talked about today, it might be a good indicator that you're not quite yet ready. Now, on the other hand, if you are so scared, it's because you're excited, but you've touched on all these things and you're ready to go, then maybe you are ready to proceed and you can take the next steps in doing so the right way. Now, this video is meant to talk to you about my personal experience of leaving a job, something that I loved, that was dedicated to, that I thought I was going to retire from. But of course, make a decision based on what is best for you and your family. I hope that these 7 tips help kind of bring some things to light for you, that you stopped and really thought about different situations to consider before hitting that send button. But I know that if you are ready to quit, it must be for a good reason, And I will be talking about in my next video the 5 things to do before your last day on your job. So thank you so much for watching again. I really do appreciate your time. I absolutely love just talking about my experience, and again, I hope that it helps somebody out there. So once again, thank you. If you love the video today, please consider subscribing and hitting that like button. It would help me a lot, and I am looking forward to continuing to make more videos, share more information regarding my experience, and continuing to grow. So take care and have a wonderful rest of your day.